Hello and welcome to the BCRC show. I am your host, Clint Chappell, and this is the show that advocates that BC resources should make BC jobs. Also, that BC resources are everybody. We are BC resources. I know everyone can see that we have guests here today, and there's going to be a bunch of people wanting to get to it right away. But the first thing I have to do is I have to thank our first responders. They're doing such a good job keeping us safe. All the frontline workers. You know, COVID's been a really tough almost a year now. It's unbelievable how fast time has flown by. But thank you to the first responders. Thank you for the frontline workers. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the amazing work, and you guys have our support. So just keep doing the great things. Also, follow us on Instagram at the BCRC. Follow us on Twitter at the BCRC. Find us on LinkedIn. Find us wherever you can on social media, YouTube. Just find us and follow our content. And the last thing before we get started here today, guys, let's sign up for some memberships. I want to see more memberships coming in. Don't do this without getting some memberships. None of this stuff's possible. We can't keep getting cool guests on without more memberships. So visit our website, www.thebcrc.ca. So I'm going to introduce the guests now. First, we have the CEO of the West Coast Olefins, also the president of the West Coast Olefins, Mr. Ken James. How's it going today, Ken?
Hey, great to see you, Clint, and really glad to be on here with you again. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. And the other gentleman you see is El Presidente, the president of the BCRC himself, Mr. Willy Manson. How's it going?
Well, good evening, Clint and Ken, and glad to see you both back on here again, too.
Yeah, great to see you too, Willy. I like the background there with no snow in it. You're an optimist.
That's right. Well, the first thing we're going to do is this is the first time that we have two appearance guests here on two-time appearance guests for both these guys. I couldn't just have Ken because then El Presidente would be like, I want to be the first two-time guest. So we had to do them both at the same time. So we really thank you guys both you guys for coming on. I know everyone wants to talk about it. So let's
glad you recognized his fragile but big ego.
That's right. Well, you know what? I think I don't want to leave everyone kind of waiting here to get to the announcement and stuff. So Ken, can you please catch us up on what's been going on with the West Coast Olefins project over the past several months?
Well, it's been very busy. Like everybody else, we've had to adapt to a lot of changes that have happened over the year of 2020, the one we'll remember and want to forget. Adapting to COVID and, adapting to an election and a new government. And so we've been busy trying to move the project forward. We were limited in what we were able to get done formally through the regulatory process, but we made a quick decision to, okay, let's look very carefully at preserving our capital, how to advance this project and make sure that we are staged to be the most shovel-ready project once people turn their attention to economic recovery as we come out of this COVID. And I think we're just a few months away from doing that. And so what we have done, the last time we talked, I think we were talking about looking at McLeod Lake as the location. We did explore that. We'd explored a number of other areas. And at the end of the day, we made a decision to come all the way back into Prince George. So we've now secured the original site we were on. And it was driven by a number of reasons. I mean, one of the reasons that we moved north was in response to some of the feedback we got from the local community. It was interesting when we made the move north that we got a lot of feedback actually to come back. So it seems to have motivated the silent majority to have a voice. And I think BCRC has been a big part of that. I think organizing the silent majority is so critical in moving things forward today. I think a lot of us are getting frustrated with a vocal minority driving the agenda. And at the end of the day in the north, I mean, people need work. I think everybody in industry, environmentalists, all of us want to do responsible development. And one thing I hope we've learned from this COVID is, boy, we better do more than just ship raw resource. Or next thing you know, we can't get N95 masks because we didn't develop that manufacturing capability. We can't get the vaccine because we develop the technology and we move it somewhere else to be manufactured. And I think that applies across the resource development space. And I think that fits so well with your mandate, and really want to do whatever we can to support you, and really, really appreciate the support you provide to projects like ours. So we've been busy. So we've got a new site now. We've informed the Environmental Assessment Office that we want to get this project approval process started. So late last fall, a year ago, we had our Section 11 order was issued. They had set up the working group. At the end of the day, we could have went through the process and we would have gotten nowhere given the changes in government and everybody being locked down. So it seems like we lost time. I think we used the opportunity to use the time we had to be better prepared today and reset. So I think we're just going to have to take the year 2020 out of the schedule and just collapse it. And
Yeah.
I think you're all doing that. So
yeah, I think everybody in the world is. So hold on here. I just want to make sure everyone fully understands what you just said. So a couple months ago, you came on the BCRC show. You said you guys were considering moving the project out to McLeod Lake. What you have just told everybody here live on the BCRC show, and thank you for doing that, because this is going to be a good little bump for us, is that you are now moving back to the city of Prince George, to the BCR site, to your original location. That's huge news for Prince George.
Yep, it is great news. And the other thing we've done is we filed the pre-application, which is the first step you take with the Oil and Gas Commission for the NGL recovery plant. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in the show here, but we may move that slightly ahead of the schedule of the main ethylene plant schedule there. And there's some business reasons you want to do that. So.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess, I have so many, I got 1,000 questions now, and you kind of already answered some of this, but I'm still going to see if I can get some more out of it. What were your key reasons for looking north of Prince George? Like why were you looking north instead of looking 150 meters away from my shop?
Well, I think both you and Willie were at that first public announcement we made in Prince George. And one of the things we've said all along is we are going to be responsive to the local community, and we want to be seen to being responsive. So we did. We heard a lot, and you probably read a lot in the paper from Too Close to Home and Pacha. And they stood right up in meetings and asked me why didn't I think about the hard highway. And so we said, well, let's go look at it. So we did. We started conversations with Chief Chinji. That was all very positive. We started looking at the old Paul lumber site, said, okay, we can use a previously industrial land rather than having to disturb raw land. We've never believed that's the right thing to do if there's industrial land to use. However, when we got north, what we found out is the Too Close to Home folks were right back objecting to our project. So we didn't gain their support. And in fact, we ended up getting a lot of pushback from residents in Summit Lake. So we looked and going, well, we didn't appease those that were opposing the project. And then the whole complexity of not getting the land we wanted, going to Crown land, and then, so those were the drivers, was to try and appease the public, do the compromise. It was going to be further out of town, longer drive for our workers. We accepted that. However, when we didn't get those objectives and we got all the downsides, it made no sense anymore.
No, for sure. And, one thing I can say is there is a lot of support in the Prince George area for this project to be in the Prince George tax bracket type idea, to make sure that some of these city taxes are able to come to the Prince George and surrounding area. So one of the questions, I guess, another follow-up to that, and again, you've kind of answered it, but I still want to go back and try to get a little bit more. What were the key motivators to move this project back to Prince George? Is it the community itself? Did you hear a lot and everyone's like, hey, let's get this thing back to PG?
Yeah, so we didn't get the objectives we wanted by going north. But what we did discover is those in opposition were never going to be satisfied unless we were willing to just roll up our project and give up. But when we heard back, when we moved north, that was actually the most positive feedback we got for our project. People disappointed to lose the jobs. People disappointed if they were going to have to do 45-minute commutes each way if they did get jobs out there. So there was a lot of positive actual messaging we got when we left. And it's funny what it takes to motivate people that would sit by. And I mean, people, when we talk to them, we're supportive, but not vocal out. And, you know, and I'm going to kudos to you guys in the BCRC. I hope you guys, through the stuff that you've been doing, I've been watching not only our project, but other initiatives, you're gaining a lot of support. But what you're really doing, in my mind, is giving voice to a silent majority across the North. As you know, I'm looking at another project that some people out in Terrace Kitimat asked me to develop. And same thing, there's a vast majority who want to do it. There is a loud minority that you have to overcome. And we have to learn to put voice to that. And organizations are like yours are so critical to make sure we balance the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, organizations like ours, they need sponsors. So I'm going to go into a quick little thing here. You know, I see a lot of people watching here. Go to the BCRC webpage, www.thebcrc.ca. Find out who our sponsors are, because I'm not going to name all. There's way too many now for me to list off every single one. Thank you so much, sponsors. You guys mean the world to us. We could not do what we're doing right now. You see that beautiful billboard behind El Presidente right there. That's funded by you guys. We have another billboard out towards the airport. All the social media stuff you guys see. Thank you. You guys, the sponsors have been unreal. And if you want to become a sponsor, I can tell you personally, for my company, it did wonders for us. The exposure we got has been phenomenal. So again, thank you to the sponsors. So let's just, you know, let's kind of go into the future. I see El Presidente wants to talk, but we'll get to him eventually. You know, let's go into the future here a little bit. Like, what are the next steps required to advance the project towards a final investment decision?
So it really is going to get into the formal regulatory approval process, which encapsulates the whole consultation, First Nations consultation, general public consultation. So one thing we will do is we're going to advance the NGL recovery plant through the BC Oil and Gas Commission and restart that ethylene plant. So that those moves have already been made. I actually got a call here today that they want to talk to me tomorrow down in Victoria. So the whisper's getting out that we're up and reactivating the project. And you will notice that the Ministry of Jobs has had a slight name change. They've added economic recovery as one of the critical portfolios underneath the Ministry of Jobs. So the government is going to be keenly focused on economic recovery. I mean, we've all taken a big hit. So I think it's important to have projects like this ready to go, because most projects, as you probably read, are canceling, terminating, stalling, deferring. So this is a great project. We don't need a big pipeline like we've already got. We're going to use existing resource. It's got a great environmental story. So we think it's the right time, and to take advantage of this, it's so important. And I know when I talk to people in the Prince George area, people across the North for that matter, projects like this are so critical, not only for the work that it brings, but it expands the skill base and portfolio skills that they can bid on. When I was out in Kitimat, it was interesting talking about the rationalization of doing all the work offshore. And it was, well, BC doesn't have the right skills, doesn't have the right people to do it. Well, you can keep saying that and it'll always be true. But I remember there was a time when you didn't know anything about logging either.
Yeah.
There was a time when you didn't know anything about mining, and you're experts at it. You're experts. You travel all over the world showing other people how to do it. So this is just one of those things. When I talked to Lori Ackerman, mayor of Fort St. John, she says we're every bit as good as anybody in Alberta on that. So it's just a matter of doing it. And so this is going to be important. So that's the first step, is really going to get through that regulatory process. And then the next one is going to be advancing commercial discussions with key stakeholders. That are going to be, who are the gas producers that we're going to be putting feed into our plant. The advantage of our project is we're using an existing pipeline, and we can do it all within the boundaries of British Columbia. So we've talked with a number of producers that have got significant resource in Northeast BC. Post-FID investors, who's going to own these facilities when we're done. We've had a lot of those discussions. They stalled a lot with COVID. You know, it's very difficult to get in front of people and hard to really get down and do the nitty-gritty negotiations when you're doing it over Zoom. Zoom is a great platform, but it still doesn't replace face-to-face discussion. Discussions with Enbridge. So we've had some discussions with the West Coast Energy side of Enbridge, and they're quite supportive, and some of the big shippers on that system. So we think there's a big opportunity as this is coming forward, and we're getting a lot of momentum. It's going to be probably an even bigger project. And then the other big one we're doing, and this has always been a key platform for us, and I want to talk about this a little more, is working with our local contractors, finding the specific scopes of work so people start to get real comfortable with what it is, what's in it for me. Because I'll tell you, that's what drives all of us, isn't it?
No, for sure.
What's
Absolutely.
in it for me?
Yeah. I mean, what's in it for Prince George? I know El Presidente is going to have some questions for that here in a couple more, but I still got a couple more I want to fire your way.
Well, you're a lot easier than he is, Clint, so you keep firing here.
Don't say that until I ask this next question. So obviously a project like this is going to have big challenges. It's going to have uncertainties. And I do fear that maybe some of these uncertainties and legitimacies, almost, people are going to have negative condensation of it coming back from McLeod Lake to Prince George. How do you kind of fight that? What are your biggest challenges for this project? What are your uncertainties with it?
Well, let me speak to uncertainties. When I think back to a year ago and going into 2020 and what we were going to do, I had no idea COVID was going to hit us like it did. When I started thinking about it that time, was looking into McLeod Lake, I had no idea a government decision was going to come down and completely change the boundary of Treaty 8. When I went into 2020 last year, I had no idea we were going to have a new government. So just from the specific big things that happen and impact our project, there is no way you could have guessed all these things would happen. So we've had to adapt, and I think as we look back, we're looking back and say, you know, it probably wasn't as big an impact as long as we adapt to it and don't let it crush us. And I think there's going to be some real strength. So, you know, the election of the new government added a new level of uncertainty. Overall, though, I believe a majority government's better than a minority government, and probably a lot better than a minority government supported by Green Party. Would be very hard to push projects under a Green Party mandate. So I think it's a real positive. When I talked with Premier Horgan, he was a big proponent of value add processing of BC's resources. So his discussions match up very well with the BC Resources Coalition. And I think
we'd
when
love
I talk to everybody,
on the show. We'd love to get him on the show. So if you
all
can
right,
get him
I'll
on the
give
show,
I'll
let's
give
do
him a
that.
push. Well, you know, and it doesn't matter all colors. They all believe in your mandate. I think you really do cross all the platforms. So you know, I mean, I see now that it's done, that it's an uncertainty that I think will have a positive effect, but it's a delaying effect. So as we went into the election, really since the summer when we knew the election was coming, through until after the election, and then they have to appoint ministers, and then they appoint deputy ministers. So we'll have a fully functioning government, I believe, in the new year. And so we'll be ready for it. And thank God we took the steps we did. And thank God we weren't too far ahead of ourselves. It actually can be the wrong thing if you get too far ahead and then have these big changes. So continuity of leadership in the Ministry of Environment has stayed pretty much the same. Continuity in the leadership inside the Ministry of Energy and Mines. So it is still Premier Minister Ralston, and the Deputy Minister Fazil Millar has stayed the same. So a lot of those same people are there. So the continuity, they know about our project. We don't have to go and get people up to speed. So I think it's going to be a positive, but it was an uncertainty. Another area of uncertainty is traditional territory. It's going to be the negotiations with First Nations. Our project, we're really going to push it onto fee simple land, but it falls within the traditional territory of Clélé consultation. We're going to start that formal process here in the new year. But there's going to be a big piece of uncertainty in that they have an election in April. I don't believe we're going to have any hope of being at a position to be signing an agreement, but you're going to do 3 or 4 months of consultation, then there's the potential for to have a complete change in chief and council, and God only knows what that will do to the discussions we've had. So all the uncertainty we had in 2020, I can see some areas where we're going to have uncertainty in 2021, but at the end of the day, I think we're going to have keen focus on the economy, way more than it was. If you remember how 2020 started, it was a bunch of blockades on railway across the country. Wet'suwet'en and blocking this Trans Mountain. Have we heard anything about those things in the last year? They're not frontline news because we've had bigger things thrown at us. And it's not, I'm not trying to make light of those issues. It's amazing how we refocus when we get new information put in front of us. And so that's what we're doing. And we still see uncertainty, but it's just, you have to adapt to it. Uncertainty is just so much of doing anything these days. And of course, the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic itself. Anybody want to make bets of when we're out of this? When this is all good? When we
don't tempt
find
me.
out that
Don't tempt me.
we're going to grow an eye in the middle of our forehead because we didn't test the vaccines enough. Like, there's so much uncertainty in front of us, but we can't give up. And I'll tell you, Canadians need the economy to move forward after this. We're going to need it more than ever. I mean, we've got government spending trillions of dollars.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you just said there. We're going to, after this time period is done, people haven't been working for a year. It's time to start pushing some of these projects forward. And I see some people here in the comments. I'm just going to quickly turn to that. The announcement is that the project, the West Coast Olefins project, is now coming back to Prince George. It's going to be in the BCRC site. It's a huge announcement for Prince George. So spread the word, share the love. I think Prince George is ready for this. Quick plug, social media. Follow us on Instagram at the BCRC. Follow us on Twitter at the BCRC. Find us on YouTube. We have our own channel now because we just hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, which is awesome. Thank you, Ryan Yorston. You are the man. Also, follow us on LinkedIn, everywhere. Wherever you have social media, we are. We're just not on TikTok yet. We're working on getting El Presidente on TikTok. Another question here that I kind of have, and I'm hogging you, and that's fine. I got 2 more questions, and then El Presidente can take it off after this. How are the discussions proceeding with key stakeholders? Again, I know you're kind of answering all this as we go, but can you kind of revisit that too, please?
You bet, Clint. I mean, as you know, there's, when you're in the middle of negotiations, not a lot you can say publicly until you conclude those negotiations. And then even within the terms of any agreement with a proponent, they're going to limit how much information goes out. But at the same time, we do have to keep everybody on side and making sure they know this is going forward. So we have been having discussions with producers and shippers on the Enbridge T-South system. And remember, we have to keep in mind that they are Enbridge's customers. They are the people that actually own the gas in the pipeline. Enbridge is the pipeline owner, is no different than CN. They own the track, they own the trains. The product that is on those trains is never CN's. And so the product in that pipeline is never Enbridge's. So they're there to serve their customers. We're working with their customers. We need to align those interests, and that will align us with Enbridge. We've had some very positive discussions with Enbridge, the historic West Coast energy folks, who are of a long history in British Columbia. And of course, they're as gung-ho about British Columbia as you folks are. So everybody's looking for an opportunity to extract more value. I mean, we've all been hit hard. The energy industry, as you may know, we saw minus $35 oil. Who'd ever seen that one? I mean, what a year it has been. And so everybody's trying to, how do we squeeze every last ounce of value out of the resource, which comes right back to the central theme of your organization.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is value add. And
Absolutely.
we have to start thinking differently. And I think we've actually had some very good lessons in the last year shown to us. I mean, it's so frustrating when you see all the parts and pieces that come out of British Columbia to go into an N95 mask. I'm talking to my brother, who's a senior executive with 3M, who makes the N95 masks. And they're having an argument with their CEO and Donald Trump, who's telling them they can't send any back to Canada. It's ridiculous.
Chaos.
And so we need to start doing our own manufacturing, and I think we need to do that. And I think we got a great opportunity to wake Canadians up to that whole theme. And I think we also need to recognize that the American market cannot be our only market. And British Columbia is on the doorstep to the obvious second market, and that is all of Asia. I mean, if we're serving 350 million people in the US, there's 3.5 billion people we could be serving in Asia. And that is really, really an advantage British Columbia has.
Yeah, for sure.
British Columbia can serve that and develop this industry and serve that market on its own. I would hope that we start doing it as Canadians and as Western Canadians, but I guess we got to start doing the things that we can do on our own, that we control. And I think British Columbia is ready to do that. So we have had a number of discussions with Asian parties, a number of Asian parties that have actually invested in resource in British Columbia. As you know, there's been a lot of LNG projects and a lot of LNG proponents behind it. Well, with the exception of LNG Canada, none of them have found a route to get that gas back out of the country. So they were keen to get that investment to happen. So we brought a new guy on our board now who used to be on the Huajian Sinopec board. He's got some great connections with Asian companies, China, Japan, Korea. So we're looking, we think that's who's going to be key to ours. They'll be signing the offtake agreements on long term. And one of the critical things is when you do these long-term agreements, you want to sign somebody up for a 25-year agreement and it's worth billions of dollars. You could sign it, Clint, but it's not worth anything because you're not worth billions.
Nope.
I could sign it and it's not worth anything because I'm not worth billions. The list of people that are creditworthy to sign on to a 25-year offtake agreement is very small today. And so that's where look at some of these Asian sovereign corporations that can take on these agreements, and you're really signing up with their government. So, and that's who we think is you're going to need to. I mean, Canada is going to need outside investment. Unfortunately, I don't think Justin Trudeau's $170 ton carbon tax is going to make us more competitive.
I 100% agree.
I find it very frustrating when I see Hydro-Quebec would rather sell their green electricity to Americans rather than share it across the borders to provinces in Canada. But if we're going to have that kind of discussion, let's have the discussion in whole. Can't just say, here's a tax, but we don't want to use our green energy for Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
you know what? I just want to fit one more question in here before we kind of get to El Presidente, because again, I can see his face is getting redder. He's getting madder by the second. He wants to jump in here and get going with you. And again, I don't know how much you can say on this because everything is kind of touch and go kind of right now here, but I'm still going to ask the question anyway. The rumor is that the West Coast Olefins has not reached an agreement with the First Nations yet. Obviously, you've touched on that a little bit. Does the lack of an agreement with the First Nations impact the environmental assessment approval process? Is there anything you can talk about there?
I find it interesting that people would expect actually to have an agreement with First Nations. As I mentioned, we are just about to start the regulatory process. And it is that regulatory process actually that lays out the consultation process with the public and First Nations. So, and remember, the agreements that we're seeking are called impact benefits agreements. So if you were just starting the consultation process and it's an impact benefits agreement, seems pretty natural. And it's the way it's laid out is the first step is once you know what your project is and what its impacts are, you have to look at quantifying the impacts on traditional rights, treaty rights, title rights of the affected First Nations. So we haven't even got to that stage. So we've identified the First Nations. We're just talking now about here's our emissions, yada, yada, yada. Here's where we're going to build. So we are just at that early stage of trying to quantify impacts. And then once that's done and we reach agreement, and we'll be doing this with the government alongside. For the EAO process, there's a working group that's set up, and in the case of building in the BCR site, that had Clayton membership on that working group. And so they work on that group, they provide input, and so that process will go on. As I mentioned, we're going to start doing that. They're going to have an election, so we're not sure whether we're going to have a reset, or hopefully we just end up with the same continuity and we just keep on moving with those discussions. Mm-hmm. But we have to be prepared that it may take a hard right turn. And we've seen that a few times in British Columbia. So the normal process is we shouldn't have an agreement at this point. We should have an agreement, I'm guessing, later in 2021 at some point.
All right. That's good news. Okay, so I got to turn this over to Willy here. Again, El Presidente, he gets mad when I call him Willy. Just one more thing here, guys. I see a whole bunch of people watching this. Please sign up for memberships. The only reason why we can do all this stuff is because we're funded by our members, and the more members we have, the bigger opportunities there is for British Columbia. We're really trying to be the voice of the voiceless. We're really trying to promote that BC resources should make BC jobs. So please enable us to do that and share our content. If you see our stuff, please share it. That's how the word gets out. I want to see these numbers. Right now, we're sitting at 1,500 followers. Let's get that to 1,800 in the next couple months. Let's get to 1,800 likes in the next couple months. Let's really start this get more followers on our Facebook page, on our Instagram, and more memberships. Finally, El Presidente, thank you for waiting so long. You've been gracious with your time. Mr. President,
his truck's still running.
Yes, his truck is still running. That's an inside joke. Willy, as the president of the BCRC, you must be hoping for some big things from this project and the opportunities it will bring for local contractors. I know that we're going to be able to have a whole foundation set for local contractors, and my kids are going to be able to work at these plants and work at all these facilities for their careers. So this must be a huge opportunity for local contractors.
Well, it is. And thanks very much for taking me off mute, Clint, after about 32 minutes. It's kind of nice to sit here and listen to you and Ken talk back and forth as I'm sitting on my hands. As most of us know here in the North right at the moment, we have, and we're in kind of a work bubble. There's a lot of work going on in Northern BC. We've got everyone knows that the LNG is going on. There's upgrade of the north-south natural gas line. And I see this work, these major projects coming to an end or coming to a close maybe in about 2 years. And I'm really quite concerned that what's going to keep the economy going, moving ahead. You and Ken have talked fairly high up, and I kind of like to lower it down to the north here. And I see that we may need some projects to keep us going, keep the workers working, keep the tax base coming in for the government, for the city that needs it, all our hotels and motels and contractors and the employees. And early in the engagement with Ken, you and I had discussions, Ken, that you were committed to giving a portion of this project's work to local contractors. So where are you at with that now? Can you share some of that, some of the steps that you've been taking?
Well, Willy, it was almost 2 years ago when we first met, and I asked you to organize a bunch of the introduction to the local contractors. And to this day, we are strong, firm believers that we need to ensure that a significant economic benefits flow out to local companies and individuals. And that will be a key factor in us gaining local support for our project. I mean, all projects are about, you're going to have a definite impact. When you have a project of this scale, you're going to have an impact. If the benefits to the locals do not outweigh any of those impacts, whether it's increased traffic, air emissions, whatever, safety, if they don't, those benefits don't far outweigh it and they don't see it, you're never getting traction. And we've watched that in today's world. That is so critical. So we are big believers. So we've been working very closely with many of the contractors. We're really stepping up our effort now that we're going to get into this consultation process and really trying to get down to matching specific scopes of work with capabilities of local companies and individuals. And then what we're seeing is even some of those people are, okay, let's get our 3 little companies together and see if we can put together, maybe we can take a bigger bite of the scope of work. And that's really great to see, because that really helps make our job a lot easier. And it makes it a lot easier for us to increase the amount of scope we can leave in the local community. At the end of the day, we're going to have to fight with bankers and everybody else that are going to say, yeah, but I don't see what I see in Alberta. I don't see what I see in Korea on the construction side. It's here, it needs a little fine tuning. So we're continuing to do that. So one of our key efforts has been to engage a couple of experienced local companies that that are interested in developing the new fabrication facilities to produce large vessels and the big process modules that are too large to ship into the Prince George area. I mean, we've got the Rockies to the west, east, and the coastal range to the west. I mean, there's just no way you can bring modules here. And these plants have big equipment. So we need to do a lot of it locally, and we need to get the local workforce organized. And so one of the guys is Brian Fair. So he's a pretty dynamic guy, and he's a really hard guy to follow. But one thing everybody always says, if Brian says he's doing it, he'll get it done. Just stand out of the way. So great to have somebody like him. We've got another gentleman that we're working with, another company. They're well established. They're a little more reserved. So hopefully there'll be a bit of a counterbalance to Brian. They don't want their name announced at this point, but we're just working with them as well to do likewise. So, and with that, you're going to see, okay, that's some big heavy hitters from the local community. And we work with them carefully and said, look, you've got to involve all the other little contractors. And there is a role, it all fits. And we'll be rolling that out here. The other big block of work that is obvious is all of the civil works. Concrete, foundations, undergrounds, site clearing, site prep, earth moving, all of that. And that's a real strength of this city. There's a lot of yellow paint in Prince George. So between those two big scope, we think we can leave a big block of work that will impact virtually everybody. A lot of it will be direct employment on our project. And then remember, all those other little guys that aren't working on ours, they're going to be filling in some of the work that you guys are not going to be able to pay attention to. So, I mean, it has a positive impact across the community. And so we're looking forward to that. And it's central, as you say, Willie, that's central to our whole strategy in gaining public support.
So Ken, once you're able to travel to BC and the restrictions are eased, do you have a team member that's going to be liaisoning with some of the smaller contractors, or how do you propose on pulling some of the smaller contractors into this?
So Ron Just is now going to be dedicated to organizing the contractors in the north. He's actually planning to come there for, I think, 3 weeks in January, as soon as he can, and just work closely, and really is trying to get down to specific scopes of work, explain the grand scope of work, and then try and match up specific scopes to specific companies. The sooner each and every company in Prince George understands what the job is they're getting out of this, the sooner they're going to get, and the more vocally they're going to get support about the project. As long as they think it's vague and I might or might not get work, it's hard to get people motivated. So that's going to be critical to have Ron up there. Shafiq is going to liaise with the contractors that we've been in discussions with out of the Vancouver area and Lower Mainland. So I think with Shafiq living in Vancouver, that's much easier to do. And one of the things that we struggled with is trying to get that communication north and south. COVID did not help that. So we're going to facilitate that ourselves. And then Ron, Shafiq, and I will make sure that there's the right amount of communication between north and south. And we're going to divide the work up so that we don't need to have too much communication that are just points of failure.
So is there a central, will Ron be the only person to connect with? Can the BCRC help and aid in herding all these cats, or should we leave that to Ron? Or is there any type of touchstone that some of the companies can reach out to in the meantime?
I think what you're going to see is they just turn the lights off in the building, guys. So
it's all good. It's all good. Live TV, man. This is what happens. It's all good.
Yeah. So Ron is probably going to work with the local contractors and put together the natural leaders in that area. So I think, like I know in the civil area, he's talking with Jack Fomanoff and Jason Page, who've got two big companies. Now they're going to involve everybody. I mean, what I've seen of Jack, he involves everybody all the time anyway. He's already been out to the site, walked it, took his engineer out there, found all the gravel we're going to need. He said, can't remember how many cubic meters of concrete he's found gravel for, and he's offered to bring a backhoe. They're going to do some studies out there. Brian gave his okay to, hey, send them out there. I'm all for it. Let's get this thing moving. So yeah, so we're going to see some activity very quickly here.
Okay. I just need to note, if you lived in BC, we're going to have Site C up and running here in a couple of years, and you wouldn't have brownouts like you have in Calgary right now.
Yeah, I know. But if you guys can get the engineering done on the embankments there on the dam, you'll be good.
Okay, moving on. So Ken, I understand from reading on the EAO site, the Environmental Assessment Office site of your Section 11, and on your website as well, that there's what I'm going to call 2 points to your project moving ahead. One's the natural gas liquid recovery plant.
Yeah.
One's the ethylene. So could you define each one of those simply, and then is there a priority on those?
Yes, there is. I mean, you can't have the ethylene plant without the NGL recovery plant, but you can have the NGL recovery plant without the ethylene plant. And so, to be clear, the one thing you need the ethylene plant is if you're going to recover the ethane. If we were to, the actual straddle plant, the NGL recovery plant, is economic if I just recover the propane, butane, and condensate. So the value of those liquids will pay for that investment. The ethane makes it a very, very good investment. So, so we would obviously like the NGL recovery at least ahead of the ethylene plant, because you cannot start the ethylene plant without the NGL recovery plant running. There's a lot of reasons to have it 6 months to a year ahead of the ethylene plant. Inevitably, when you build these big plants, there's little bugs that you got to work out, things that somebody wired wrong. Not that Millstone would do that.
Hey.
I knew I'd get him back in the conversation.
I'm going to put him on mute like he did with me.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, there's just all those things to line out. And the OGC process is actually a little simpler, so we can get through that regulatory process a little faster. So there is makes a lot of sense that we could actually split the projects out and have one lead by 6 months to a year. And that extra year in the construction project, of course, would allow us to spread the work out more and give a bigger portion of it to local contractors.
So you would start one project first and
Yeah.
then lead into the second project.
Yeah, so imagine that you say, okay, we're just going to do the civil and undergrounds for the NGL recovery plant first. And then by the time you go to the above ground work, those civil guys are now finished over here. They go and work on the other site. And you basically have the crews lagged. But obviously there's going to be a lot more that stays in the local community. So,
Right.
And it does, you do not want to have that $4.5 billion of ethylene polyethylene plant waiting because you can't get the $1.2 billion straddle plant up and running reliably. So,
okay, so here's the $1 question, the $1 billion question. If your regulatory applications and commercial discussions are successful, when would you expect construction to start? And on the other hand, when would the facility or the first facility start out?
So because the OGC process is fairly streamlined, and assuming we don't hit any more speed bumps like we did this year, I can imagine that we could be ready to start construction early in 2022, a year from now. So in the meantime, I mean, I talked to Brian. He said, don't worry, Ken, I'm going to start getting that shop ready because, as you may know, he's working on a pellet plant in Fort Nelson. And when I know Brian, what he tells me he's doing and what other things he hasn't told me, he's busy. So he said he's building a shop in any event. So you're going to see some of that work start right away. And then final investment decisions, you don't wake up one day and say, hey, today's yes, and every day was no. What happens is we will grow to closer and closer to, oh, it's pretty sure this is going to go ahead. As you remove each barrier, the certainty moves ahead. And as that certainty moves ahead, people's commitments start to roll, right? And when I start talking to, Clint about, hey, we need to start talking crews, when, oh shit, we're almost through the regulatory process, then he's starting to schedule people. Same with you, Willie, as you're looking through your shop and, should I be building a bridge for Coastal GasLink, or should I be working on structural beams for the modules? So it really comes down to, as we get closer to certainty, keeping you guys in the loop, it'll start, that lead work will start later this year, later in 2021. I'm already moved into 2021. I'm in such a hurry to get 2020 behind me.
We all are. It's okay.
Another 2 weeks, we will anyway. So that's, it makes sense then, I guess, why you want to engage with the contractors early in the project, just to make sure you know the capacity, and we're not all scrambling at the 11th hour to try and put crews and facilities together to meet the project's commitments. So I'd like to move on with my final comment, if I can, Clint.
Go ahead. You're the president.
Okay. What can the BCRC do to work with your project and other projects that we're looking at and supporting? For example, the inland port in Terrace, that could be a very big project. You just mentioned the pellet plant in Fort Nelson, which is Peak Renewables, Blackwater Gold, and other projects that are coming on the line that we don't know about, or that are simmering until the world gets back engaged again. What can the BCRC do to help you guys on these projects?
The biggest thing you guys can do is do what you've been doing. Keep gaining momentum. I think Clint's turned into the #1 pitchman. Like, you guys got to do that. You've got to give voice to so many people that are out there they just don't have an avenue to get their support out there and even feel empowered that they can have a positive impact on it. So I think doing what you're doing, you guys represent a wide cross-section of the community, the contractors. I think when we organize those contractors, many of them are your members. They'll have a separate role, but I mean, the overlap is tremendous. When we get into the public consultation process and we say, hey, we're going to meet with the mayor and council, we can have those few environmentalists that always show up and try and put the kibosh on, or we can fill up all the seats with your members. And that's powerful. When I talk to the mayor, he says that impacts how they're going to react to it. So that's important. When we get into public consultation meetings, bring your membership out, have them help us. Absolutely, it's so critical. That's why we pulled out a full corporate membership with your organization. We think it's brilliant, and I think the timing is so good now. I think Canadians are faced with some pretty tough decisions as we go forward, and economic recovery is first and foremost, and we got to do it responsibly. Like this whole climate change thing is real, it's serious, but the answers they're there if we work together and we wake up the bigger voice of everybody.
Yeah.
I think what you just said is very, what you just said is very important. Is there's always two sides to everything, right? So really coming together, and I've seen the comments here going off here. We have like 70 some or 50 some odd comments going on right now. We all have to work together. This like Ken just said, environmental change is real. And we all have to come together to find viable solutions for the future. We can't just be naysayers and say this project shouldn't happen. We can't just be like, yeah, write a blank check and let it happen. We all have to come together and work together. Sorry, Presidente, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just have one more comment, Clint, and then you can have the talking stick back. 2 days ago, the BCRC sent out the fall 2020 newsletter, and it went to our members. And I haven't looked yet, Clint. Do you know if it's on our website? And I would very much like the people that are watching the show to have a look at our newsletter and see what we've been doing since our last newsletter that we sent out in the spring. So Clint, do you know if it's on the website yet?
The newsletter itself, I can put it on the website. I don't know if it's on the website, but I will get on it and make sure that if it's not on there, it will be on there right after this. How's that sound?
Great. Sounds good.
Put
Okay,
me on the spot
I'll turn the talking stick. I'll turn the talking stick back over to you.
No, I just thought, you know what, I did say we might have a time for 1 or 2 questions. We only got a couple minutes left, and Ken and Willie have been so gracious with their time. So I got just a quick question here. The primary market for polyethylene is in Asia. Can you speak to the other local value add opportunities that can be realized?
So, I mean, we know there's one pipe extruding company in Prince George, and their biggest impediment to expanding is the cost of their plastic feedstock. So when we had a local feedstock, we can sell it to them cheaper, and it costs us nothing because we don't have to incur all the costs to get it to the coast, get it across the ocean. So it again, when you start doing these basic chemicals locally, how people will then process them and make products and start expanding what we do. It was interesting when I was out in looking at a project in Terrace, and the big industrial park, virtually all the land was bought by a Chinese company. It was a government company. And you know what they were doing it? To get access to the US market, they bought that land so they could set up manufacturing of goods in Canada so they could sell Chinese goods, label them made in Canada, and send them to the US. So even the Asians recognize the opportunity to manufacture in British Columbia. Hopefully British Columbians will recognize that.
Absolutely. One other question here, and then I'm actually going to close us up here, just because there's so many questions and I wish we could answer them all. We don't have time permitting to do that. And this is going to be more for Willie, I think, than Ken, but Ken can intervene as well. Can the corporate members of the BCRC get the contact information for Ron and Shavik at the West Coast Olefins?
So the question was asked, the contact information, I assume that is for corporate, you said for corporate members, yep. People interested in participating on the contractor side. Yes. Ken, what's your thoughts on that? Would you like that to come through the BCRC for us to compile a list and send to your organization, or how would you like to see that?
Let's talk about that. I mean, I think I mean, I don't mind people contacting Ron or Shavik. I mean, they're the face to the community in the north and the south. But I want to make sure that we keep our organization separate but supportive. Mm-hmm. So.
Absolutely. I think if you have any other questions too, guys, for the West Coast Olefins, just visit their website. They got information on their website on who to contact. They have emails and stuff there too. So just visit their website and you can get any other information. What we're going to do is we're going to help them along. We're going to try to correct some facts that we don't think are presented in the right way. We're just going to be the voice and try to help this project move along from an advocacy place. So Willie, any last words here before we go?
Thank you very much, Ken, for coming on. Appreciate it. Thank you for hosting, Clint. And I hope this was informational for everyone that's watching, and stay tuned for more information upcoming.
All right, Ken, last words here.
Yeah, I just thank you very much for getting this word out, and hopefully we can get your support as we have continuing news. We're looking very optimistically at 2021 and want to routinely being able to update the public on the progress we're making, get people the sense that this project is real. As soon as they see dirt getting stirred and moved, then I think people start to get excited that there's actually something going to happen. I mean, even in the last couple of years I've watched in Prince George, a lot of rumors have come, a lot of rumors have gone. And so let's make this one happen. It's the biggest project that's on the horizon. So.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, again, the big news coming from that was broke on the BCRC. the West Coast Olefins project is coming back to the BC to the BCR site in Prince George. Huge announcement. Thank you, Ken, very much for breaking that news on our BCRC show. Also, right after this is done, you guys are going to see a press release from the West Coast Olefins. It's going to be exclusively on our webpage and on our Facebook page. So if you guys want to see the press release, stay tuned. It will go up immediately after this is this live podcast closes, or visit our website. It will be under the advocacy section on our website. One last thing, we're going to have another BCRC show, even though we haven't done them in a couple months, but we have another one actually on Thursday with the Prince George Cougars, the head coach, and Andy Beasley as well, the business president, the vice president of business for the Prince George Cougars is coming on. Can't be more excited to be working with those guys. Lots of fun. So for Ken James, the CEO and president of the West Coast Olefins, for the president of the BCRC, I am Clint Chappell, and this has been the BCRC Show.